This is where Vladimir Putin steps into politics. He leaves the KGB in 1991 and becomes the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. Putin uses his role to grant special treatment to friends and allies in the private sector. He helps them establish monopolies and restricts their competitors, quickly becoming a favorite among the oligarchs. Before long, he's gathered a support network of oligarchs, crime bosses, and security officials, mostly fellow former KGB agents, like he was. With their aid, he swiftly ascends to the upper tier of the new Russian state. In 1999, President Boris Yeltsin appoints Putin, still relatively unknown in national politics, as the prime minister. A fierce nationalist, Putin feared Yeltsin was allowing the US to dominate Russia, and that NATO, the alliance that worked for decades to curb Soviet influence, would expand into the newly liberated countries and encircle Russia. Putin's goal then became to forge a strong Russian state, one that would be both stable at home and capable of projecting more influence over its neighbors. And he soon got his opportunity. During the post-Soviet turmoil, there was mounting violence in Chechnya, a region that informally seceded from Russia in the mid-90s. Chechen warlords and terrorists were pushing into Russian land and attacking the border. In August 1999, a series of deadly explosions killed more than 300 people in several Russian cities, including Moscow. Putin, the new prime minister, immediately blames Chechen separatists for the attack. He regularly appears on Russian television declaring he will avenge Russia. The public quickly rallies behind him. Putin's approval ratings surge from 2% before the bombing to 45% after the attacks. Journalists later revealed evidence suggesting Russian security services could have been involved in the Moscow bombings, perhaps knowing they would fuel support for a strong man like Putin. But a closed state investigation swiftly crushed any dissenting claims. So Russia launches a popular and brutal war in Chechnya. The capital city of Grozny was destroyed by Russian bombing, and some estimated nearly 80,000 people were killed. In less than a year, Russia successfully brings Chechnya back under its control. In December 1999, Yeltsin resigns, making Putin the interim president. In May, during the bloody offensive in Chechnya, Putin wins the presidential election. He begins to mold the Russian state to his vision. Patronage and corruption remain among his key methods, but he quickly subdues the oligarchs under his rule. Those who support Putin are rewarded, those who don't are crushed. Once Russia's richest man, imprisoned Kremlin critic and former oil tycoon Mikhail Khodorkovsky was sentenced to 14 years in jail. This on a new conviction of embezzling oil. This is essentially a vendetta from Vladimir Putin for getting involved in opposition politics. With the oligarchy subdued, Putin was now free to extend his vision beyond Russia's borders. At the time, relations with the US were fairly good. Putin even vacationed at George W. Bush's summer retreat. I looked the man in the eye. I found him to be very direct and trustworthy. But things were about to shift. In August 2008, Russia invades Georgia, a former Soviet republic. It's a display of power and strength on behalf of pro-Russian separatists there. Russia swiftly seizes to small parts of Georgia, drawing condemnation from around the world. Interestingly though, Putin was not president during the invasion. See, the Russian constitution states the president can only serve 2 consecutive terms but sets no cap on the total number of terms one can serve. So Putin assumed the prime minister position again when his hand-picked successor Dmitry Medvedev served as president. When Obama is elected US president in 2008, he tries to reset relations with Russia, and they make some progress, most notably to restrict both countries' nuclear arsenals. But Putin stays suspicious about US intentions and remains opposed to these renewed relations. He's particularly irritated by US involvement in the Middle East, especially in Libya, in 2011. He publicly scolded Medvedev for not vetoing the action in the UN Security Council. Putin declares his candidacy for president and wins the 2012 election by an outrageous margin. Injustice, says Dmitry, this outrage can't continue. I'm here to say no to Putin. Putin starts his third term once again, amid disorder. He doubles down on his authoritarian governing style at home and his militaristic strategy abroad. But in both cases, he demonstrates a mastery of information. Since he first took office in 2000, Putin has kept a tight grip on Russian television. Essentially, all news networks are state-run propaganda machines. His regime decides which stories broadcast and how, always portraying him as the strong Russian leader. In 2012, he cracked down on human rights and civil freedoms, making clear there was no space for dissent in his Russia, using state television. For example, he launched a blistering campaign against a feminist and gay rights music group, Pussy Riot. The latest of the loudest of such performance for the so-called punk prayer at the Christ the Savior Cathedral, where they were shouting things which were rather profane to be said in church. Of course, 3 members of the punk group Pussy Riot were convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Putin also reinforced his aggressive foreign strategy. He used traditional military tactics like sending weapons and fighter aircraft to help dictator Bashar al-Assad fight a brutal civil war in Syria. But Putin's regime has also built and fostered the most effective cyber army in the world, and he's used it to cause havoc in the West. These hackers have stolen classified U.S. intelligence, hacked politicians' email accounts, and even shut down Georgia's internet while Russian troops invaded. And of course, they tried to undermine Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2016. Russian hackers have also initiated propaganda campaigns in support of right-wing candidates in Europe. With this, Putin hopes to exploit and widen the political divide in Western democracies. In 2014, the Putin vision peaked in the targeting of Ukraine, another former Soviet nation. Ukraine's president was leaning toward the West, and Putin feared he would join NATO. So Russian hackers launched a propaganda campaign against him, fueling protests in the pro-Russia eastern part of the country. He then sent in disguised Russian soldiers, and before long, violence broke out. In goes the Russian military, and in early 2014, Putin seized Crimea. He continues to support the fighting in Ukraine, and as of 2017, over 9,000 people have died. The world erupts in protest, but Putin doesn't back down. See, his aggressive foreign policy effectively weakens his neighbors while also rallying Russians behind him. But he has done all this at the cost of his own people. His invasions have triggered harsh sanctions from the West, barring Russian companies from trading in Western markets. Russian currency has crashed in value, and the energy industry that Russia depends on is collapsing. It's hard to picture Russia continuing under these conditions. But the election of Donald Trump brings fresh hope for the Putin vision. Trump's rhetoric has been notably soft on Russia. He could lift sanctions and weaken NATO, potentially opening up space for Putin's Russia to become a dominant power once more.